Hi.
There you are. Hi. It's such an honor to interview you, having watched your whole career at San Francisco Ballet.
Thank you.
One of the most extraordinary dancers in the history of that company. Every ballerina's favorite partner, I think we could say, and danced in such a range of choreography so beautifully. And I did not know that for a whole decade you've been developing as a choreographer now. So this is just completely revelatory and just amazing and wonderful to see you making your choreographic career in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, there's so much. Where to start? Let's start with Schubert's life and its relationship to the piece. It was so poignant. I just want to talk too much myself about how poignant it was to see the pieces of paper ripped apart, because Schubert was not very much recognized in his own lifetime, right? And only had one performance of his works publicly outside of his circle of friends. That was the Schubertiades that he would have, that you name this after. And so to see it ripped up and then to see people coming and picking them up and recognizing them, it was so poignant. And then taking comfort in the music that was always at the center of his life at the end was so poignant. So he only lived 31 years. There's so much in that life to pack in. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you loved his music, and from there, when you started to work with it, you started to learn more about his life. Can you tell us about how his life opened up to you and what was poignant within it? What drew you even further into this ballet when you started learning about his life?
Yeah, as I would just say, it's so common to hear this sentence, and struggling young artist, wanting to be seen. There is always somebody who is on a pedestal who the fans love, and they treat the fans terribly, and the fans still love them, and it doesn't matter. And to sometimes break through the doors, or just to be even recognized or spoken to. And I just wanted to portray that struggle, and especially from Schubert to, he loved music so much and just wanted to have it recognized, all of his hard work. And there is so much heart in his music. Every single piece is so beautiful. And thankfully, because of Jonah, I even discovered more pieces, which I didn't even know, which only probably musicians would know. It doesn't enter dancers' world so often. But what I wanted to also convey at the end with the tearing up the pieces is that this legacy carries on. It just goes on, and it's recognized. It lives after him. So if an artist, struggling artist, sometimes maybe their life's work isn't fully realized, it's hopeful that it will live on afterwards and really make an impact. And that's what I wanted to show.
And can you talk about the figure in the middle? I think the dancer was Mai, who had the kind of ruffles down, right? And was that sort of the Beethoven figure?
Yes,
time?
Like a star. Like I would just call her the star. And I really wanted to. Initially, I wanted May to be outrageous, like absolutely outrageous, ridiculously over the top, to show how he's like, saying, no, don't come close to me, not stay away, like just pushing with the feet and like brushing it all off because it's so beneath him, and he's getting all this praise and admiration, whereas Schubert is as equally good and maybe even better. And so Schubert realizing that he's a terrible person and doesn't treat everybody well, but he can't recognize that he's also brilliant at the same time. So there is this love-hate relationship between the two of them, which really is just one-sided from Schubert's point of view.
And I love the humor of that section, and yet, getting to move through that with humor and yet still have so much poignancy and heart at the end. Just a whole range of emotions that you took us through.
Yes, I wanted Schubert to in the end erase him, like be like, no, you don't control my destiny.
I love him in the background, kind of, me too, why can't they see me?
Yeah.
Really, I think there's something that the audience can identify in with that, because we've all, had that desire to be seen and felt overseen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can you tell us about working with Jonah on the score? So, first off, how amazing to have that music for us here, newly composed and performed live. Beautiful. I'm guessing you know one another through the San Francisco ballet world, had known each other through knowing people in common?
Yes, we worked together majority of our time in San Francisco Ballet, and we've known each other, and we worked together on 2 other pieces. We did, I did installation for the Young, and that was maybe 22 minutes long. It was called, it was inspired by the Estonian flag, and it was 3-piece movement, and it was very different music. But right away, why I particularly love working with Jonah is because I have to explain very little to him. I don't know how to explain this, but there is like an understanding that he gives me exactly what I want, and it's just it's too valuable to me to waste. So I immediately was thinking him for this piece, because I could not imagine anybody else doing good of a job.
That's so interesting to hear about how little you need to talk it out, because I was wondering, there's such a clear narrative arc through that piece, and did you talk that through sort of one scene at a time? How did you work out the narrative arc between you and Jonah?
Yeah, so the way that I did it was I sort of imagined the length of the piece. So Paradise, I figured it will probably be around 4 minutes. Maybe a solo, a duet, a solo or a little passage will probably be maybe 2 minutes. So we talked about that, and also the kind of feel I wanted to have. Like the third piece rather, is called Journey, and that was supposed to portray the warning signs for Schubert of, don't do this. Like it's kind of telling and growing up through that piece of realizing his destiny and what he wants to do with his life. And so we would just talk themes like that, and saying at the end, snake, and I wanted to portray that kind of desire and the slow squeeze of the snake at the end, just squeezing the life out of him. So those are the kind of the themes that we were talking about, and I thought that you did really good job, Jonah.
I loved how you use this lattice. It's so simple, but it's a window, it's a swing. It really elevated the feeling of whimsy and imagination taking flight. So when did you know that you wanted to use a device like that in the dance?
I didn't, but it came with, when I mentioned before, Trout Quartet. And I was thinking, well, maybe we could get a hook in the center, and I could have all these fishes sort of attacking him from underneath, and he's like the bait, like a worm on a hook. And then Nathan was like, that's an interesting idea. And then we bought this aerial silk, and so we practiced with that, and that didn't really took flight. And then I absolutely randomly happened to look at some old Hollywood film, and if you people know this, just raise your hand, but there was this woman in ballerina who jumped onto the net, and there was a man on the other side, and they did this parade. Must have been in the 50s or even earlier, and I was like, that's it. That's what I want. I want the net, because it makes sense. So the fishes will be caught in the net, and then it's just the whole thing started developing from that.
I wonder what that was. It sounds like Ziegfeld Follies or something crazy.
I don't know. It was just like old Hollywood film.
So it was so interesting to hear you talk at the beginning about Mats Ek, so Swedish choreographer who you've tapped into his influence, and he is usually working with more grounded feeling in the dance and this really roiling spine and typically more kind of turned in and a little bit absurdist and like you said, bringing in that humor. And you also said though that this was your first time working with dancers trained primarily in contemporary and modern. So was Mats Ek something new for you to tap into? Had that been an influence when you were working more with classical dancers? How did that come in?
It really was. It was not an influence at all before, and this time around, I was thinking, I just want to feel like, I want to feel silly. Like I'm just gonna not let anything distract me. I'm just gonna open my mind up as wide as I can and go to that place of child's play, and just play and see what I get. And all this these Mats Ek themes sort of started going through. Well, like, why don't you just do that? Like, he would be silly at this point, so why don't you think of something silly? It's not literally taking from Mats Ek, but just thinking, well, how could I lighten this part up? Like, even during the death part of I had people in the back doing sort of Western country line dance, and I wanted them to like lasso around and celebrate, but at the same time to a very sad tune to do a celebration happy dance. So to kind of offset the feel of this maybe a little bit on the nose part of what's going to happen.
You mentioned that before. That seems to be something you navigate by. So when I saw a rehearsal and met you then, you also said about, wanting to do something about Schubert, but not have it be on the nose. And just now, again, you were talking about knowing what you were going for, but not wanting it to be on the nose. How do you navigate by that? How do you have an idea and then you think, oh, that would be too hitting it, and this is a way to come at it from an angle? Is that how you kind of navigate your process?
It's a lot of back and forth with my wife, and she would be telling me like, no, that's too obvious. No, like you don't need to crumble it up for them. They will get it. They will understand. And so that went also with the costumes as well. Initially, we really just thought very elaborate, literal costumes, and then again, it was like, no, just hints of something, but that's it. It keeps it a little bit more creative.
Yeah, the costumes are great. I mean, I love that way of navigating your work because I think it gives the audience member more to do imaginatively and more agency to bring to what they're seeing. And we have to be more active and we're more drawn in, and it's exciting. Yeah. So I really appreciate that in the work.
Yeah, and I thought Mike did a really good job with lighting and really brought the whole thing in, because we just worked in a rehearsal space all the time and there was no lighting here. And this Tuesday, finally, in my head, I was like, oh wow, like this really just suddenly happened, because it was always just kind of raw working lights.
I just have two more questions and then we'll ask the audience for questions. So if you have one, be getting your hand prepared to shoot up. So at San Francisco Ballet, you worked with, they had many festivals of new choreography, and you danced the works of Mark Morris and Chris Wheeldon and Yorma Elo and so many. Who have you been influenced by, and how? Did you pick anything up from this choreographer here, this choreographer there? Sometimes there's just like one thing from that person's way of working, and you're like, oh, that helps me take my art to the next level. Was there anyone that influenced you that way?
So I really like Wayne McGregor's work, and primarily because there is such fluidity through the entire movement. To me, I visualize movement in a very circular motion, and sometimes I see it a lot of in Wayne's work. It's almost like when you watch it, your whole body starts moving with the person, and to me that's what draws me in. That's what I want to feel. I want to feel like I'm dancing to dance that I have no idea how to dance, but it's pulling me in. And William Forsythe probably is a big influence as well. Just because his mind works so much in 3D, he's thinking everything in 3D. And sometimes when I choreograph, I try to think, well, if every time that I make a movement, my arm could leave a streak in around me, so what would that look like by the end? What would that piece look like by the end? And then what my legs are doing, or like what Tracy was explaining, going from point 1 to point 9 to all of this. I would say it's much more than just movement. Yeah.
Opens up layers of imagination that
Yes.
you're bringing to what you're seeing, which is
Exactly.
so important with dance. Yeah, that's when it gets really exciting. I love it when you see a dancer who is doing what looks like a classical step, and you can see though that they have this whole story playing in their mind about why they're doing that step, and you get imaginatively involved in that. And
Yes.
I feel you bring that out too.
Yeah.
Last question from me, and then we'll go to the audience. So I was just learning from you before the performance today that you have a production of Giselle, your own Giselle, that's going to be performed by Oregon Ballet Theater in April. First full-length ballet that you're having produced by a company.
Yes.
Amazing. Want to tell us a little bit about that, and also what else is on the horizon for you?
Giselle, yes, it's one of those ballets I've danced through and through, and really, my aim is to really honor the history of classical ballet and keep what has been built before you and keep that alive, because I feel like sometimes choreographers change the past and then we don't even know what the original was. And I'm not going back to the original, but I'm going back to the place where classical ballet truly represented at the highest point of the version of a Giselle, where it was challenging, technically challenging. It was polished to the place where it was on the top of the hill. And I want to bring it back to that place where the next generations could build upon that and remember that is now, that's the standard. That it isn't something that needs to be changed or moved around. It needs to be celebrated and honored. And moving forward, it is really just, I just spoke with Jonah. We were thinking we just open up some door, like maybe we're just gonna keep working together. There's a lot of stories in me. They all want to come out at some point. So if Jonah is willing, I'm willing.
That's exciting. Questions from the audience, and I'm going to give the other Rachel the microphone.
So I'll just pick one thing because there was so much to say. But there's the moment when you have the dancer entwined in the lattice and the water fabric behind, and Jonah's playing and the dancers here are doing all this movement. There's an improvisational element because you don't know exactly which way the dancer's going to go in that lattice and how that's going to go, as well as not knowing exactly when the notes are going to land when Jonah's playing them. So for you as a choreographer, when you were watching the many iterations that I'm sure there were of that particular section, how did you experience it watching what they were doing?
We got it to the place where we were pretty well able to control that, even though it looks wild, like there was a consistency that we were able to achieve with that swinging. It took a lot of trust, because we had to figure out that making sure that no feet, no hands, nothing would be hitting the dancer underneath, because we wanted the siren to be underneath and sort of grabbing the feet every time, like Schubert would fly by. And I thought Gisa did a really good job with sort of portraying that. And speaking of Gisa's character, she really is this Schubert's manifestation of who Beethoven is to him. And at that point, well, the star, so to say. It's at that point it's become such a graceful, beautiful, but really, really lethal monster, and I wanted to show it with this most beautiful music and this hooks that want to grab, and really she's just an animal who wants to eat. and so by the end, when Schubert distracts her and just kind of like realizes that it's just an animal following a finger, tosses it away. But I thought that Chisa did a really good job. Yeah.
So how long did it take for everything to come together once you decided on Schubert and your dancers?
Oh, goodness. Well, it actually just came together today, to be honest. I hadn't even seen the dancers wearing makeup yet until today. I would say the structure was clear by maybe 3 weeks ago. Was sort of structure and the consistency was clear 3 weeks ago. But that I'm only just talking one day. We only work 1 day a week, so it's still, it sits a little bit with the dancers, and then we meet the next weekend, and then they would do it again. But yeah, it literally came together today. Yeah.
In the first part of it, I thought the blonde dancer was Beethoven, because she was telling Schubert all the things that should be done, how it was right, and he was ignoring that and doing it his own way. But then you switched. So did I misinterpret that, or were there two different dancers doing the Beethoven?
Yeah. So this was actually a teacher, Schubert's teacher, teaching Schubert how to play. And teachers, they always fuss with little fingers, and no, he needs to be down, and like, no, this angle is not quite right, you should be looking here and there, and then they just turn their heads around. And so I wanted to portray that and switch it because of Schubert's teacher experience, that he really had nothing to teach him anymore at that point, whereas Schubert switches to actually giving it back to the teacher at the end. Yeah. Any questions for Jonah?
Who designed and made the costumes?
I did. Oh, thank you. I was just painting them on Friday. Yes, they were just hanging up, and I just painted them over and over and over and over, making sure the lines stay white.
It sounded like you had some consulting.
Always, yes. We've gotten really good at fixing costumes, I would say, in the past year. Yes, yeah.
I just want to add that Tiit is also an amazing teacher and coach, and was recently featured at the San Francisco Dance Film Festival with this new documentary that just was premiered called Closer Than Yesterday, and it shows him coaching Carmela Mayo when she was in the Corps de Ballet at San Francisco Ballet through this really tough international competition. And it was a fantastic film because it was a really inside record of how supportive and level-headed and Tiit is, and how he gives that to the dancers he works with. So yeah, I really recommend that film as well. Any questions for the dancers or for Jonah?
I have a question just about the process of communication between the choreographers and the dancers. It seems like from earlier speaker today, and your style is quite different. And can you just talk a little bit about that interaction, and maybe you guys can comment too on feedback back and forth and how that creative process changes.
Can we hand this to dancers? I think they might be able to. The working process with the dancers and
It was really nice. Speaking from personal experience, I've worked with choreographers who had a vision, which was great, but always said it has to be this way, just make it work. And Tiit was never like that. It was very much, how can we make this work? Okay, let's change it here, let's do this. And it was really nice to work with someone so level-headed and someone who just wanted to create this vision and not have any ego with it, to just create pure art.
thank you.
And I think also it felt like there was an element of Tiit sort of playing to everyone's strengths. I think that felt really great, because it felt like you could find the things that you already felt proud of in your own dancing and like amp them up and make them part of this character. So that was really excellent.
You all were wonderful. But I know Allie, especially because she dances in ODC, and I know you're dancing so much already. I mean, you're a full-time dancer with ODC, and then you come and do this on Sundays with Tiit, right? And why did you want to do that?
So that's a great question. And I actually left ODC in April. And that is, so thank you. I'm currently pursuing a doctorate degree in occupational therapy, but I left ODC just in April, and I never really felt like I wanted to leave dance. I'm just transitioning my career, and when a dear friend of mine sent me Tiit's post, as he mentioned that he sent out this call, I had a few friends send it to me and say, hey, do you think you'd be interested? And I was like, absolutely. I've been, April, it's been about 6 months, and I really miss dancing, and to have this opportunity with someone like Tiit, who's such an amazing coach and has such a vision, I was very excited. So I'm not exhausted from dancing all week, but I am exhausted from thinking all week. But it's been a really lovely way to tie in dance to my current life. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Any last questions for Tiit? Oh, there's at least 2 more, so okay.
So you guys talked about the composer with the frills on the shirt. I was kind of curious about the ones with like the line or even the lightning strike. What were the meanings of those?
Oh, yes. So I wanted to have the siren kind of have claws. And I've played this with this idea around that maybe we can actually have claws, but again, I didn't want it to be on the nose, so we just used the hand. And the sort of like a lightning bolt was kind of like the claw marks of somebody just scraping, and the snake had this like a single line that was wrapped around the legs and the arm to sort of show the swirliness of the snake, and it had tiny little gems, invisible gems there at the end of the tail, like a little red gems to just show the danger, because she was dancing to the red background. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is a question for Jonah and Tiit, because I've had the opportunity to work with both of you as well in that creative stage. You described how not many words needed to be said, but I know that dancers have motion and musicians have sound, but also some of it is just emotion. Could you describe, Jonah, what it was like for you to have that, the wordless part of the communication, and Tiit as well? I'm going to give the mic. The experience of the wordless part of the communication of what Jonah, what you wanted and what Tiit wanted, and how you communicated, what that was like for each of you.
I feel like we talked a lot. I mean, we didn't argue about anything, so it felt easy. But I mean, there was at least a couple of phone calls where we spoke for at least 30 minutes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we had clear ideas, and we went in, neither of us with like a set thing that we wanted to do, that we wanted to like, you know, win over the other person. Like it was just like, okay, let's just make it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was painless, but I thought we spoke quite a bit.
Yeah, we did occasionally. I mean, there wasn't really not much to say. I would receive. So one thing you have to understand is like when you receive this musical track, it's made on a MIDI, so it sounds like a computer game. It was like the most brilliant music, computer game music. It was just unbelievable. I remember just like receiving the track for the star piece and just listening over and over and over in a car, thinking, how on earth did he came up with this? This is like a concerto. Like this is like this fantastic piece of music should be played in some Carnegie Hall or something. And like, and I have it. Like, how lucky am I? And really just and like he said, he doesn't have any ego. You know, he just wants to create beautiful music, which he does so easily, I think. But I'll take it. I can work with whatever. My first ballet was to this. I did Estonian National Ballet. I worked with Paula Matusen. I don't know if any of you know. She's just like a math teacher in the school, and she creates music with like hitting the piano with forks and like all this stuff. And so that was my first music, and I still was like, oh, this is great. Let's work with that. So that was my first experience. So this is like icing on top of icing.
I think the last piece I wrote for you, actually, I do have a very brief section because I can't stand it for too long at a time. But is a very brief section where I'm in the inside of a piano with glass rods and I think metal chopsticks. Yes. And I think that section lasted for like 4 or 5 minutes in the previous ballet I wrote.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that. It was supposed to be war and like full of like angst and anxiety. Yes.
Yeah, and all that. But none of that this time.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I know. Poor pianos.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks for Tiit and the dancers especially, and let's give them another round.
I think we got more in there, please. Rachel Howard, Tiit Helimets, dancers, musicians. Thank you very much.